Greetings and salutations, everybody. This is the Open Door Wrestling Podcast, your guide and entryway into the pro wrestling multiverse. I'm DJM, and I'm doing a wrestling podcast with my old buddy, the Subtle Doctor, once again. What's up, Doc?
What's going on, DJM? I'm doing quite well. I hope that you are faring well. And for me as well, greetings to all listeners of the Open Door Wrestling Podcast. Listen if you can. Subscribe if I let you.
Now, just to give everybody a little bit of the backstory between Doc and myself, we did a wrestling podcast once called Grappalicious, but schedule conflicts and all of those other things kind of got in the way. But now in the year 2021, the pro wrestling landscape has changed. The forbidden door is open. There's the theme. And we're both still really into everything happening in the world of professional wrestling. So we're giving it one more run. We've signed a long-term deal, and we're going to give it another shot. Doc, what do you say?
I say let's do it. I'm game. Like you said, wrestling has... it's never been more interesting. There's never been a better time to be a wrestling fan because of the forbidden door opening, as you spoke of. And yeah, I would never be doing this with anyone else besides my old reliable tag partner. So I'm raring to go. Let's talk some wrestling.
Let's talk some wrestling. Now, before we jump in, you're probably listening, well, why the hell would anybody want to listen to these two guys? Well, I figured at the beginning of the show for our first episode, we could start by providing a little context, a little bit of history into our wrestling fandom. We're both longtime wrestling fans. Doc, let's get you started. Tell our listeners, our brand new listeners to our brand new podcast, how and what made you a wrestling fan?
Well, David, so I started watching when I was probably about 8 years old. I remember my stepdad had ordered WrestleMania 8 on pay-per-view. And I didn't, of course, know this at the time, but I walked in during, midway through the card. Yeah, I remember seeing the Natural Disasters versus Money Inc. And disliking the Natural Disasters even then. So my opinion on them remains consistent through time. I remember seeing Bret Hart versus Roddy Piper and falling in love with the Hitman. I remember the main event, Sid Vicious versus Hulk Hogan, and what a spectacle that was. The wrestling was, if you look back at it now, but for, an 8-year-old me, it was quite a thing. And from then on, I was just hooked, and I would catch, WCW Saturday Night on TBS. There was no brand loyalty at the time. I was just give me wrestling. And, Raw started a few years after that, I think. And I would be a loyal fan tuning in, following everything with great relish, and some classmates of mine were super into it. And then I don't remember exactly why I fell off of it, but I did because I saw some storylines were going in weird ways. I remember Brett was booked in this feud to face Jerry Lawler, and then Isaac Yankem, his dentist. That didn't really light my fire. So I fell off, got back in during the Monday Night Wars, as many did, with the cool New World Order, repackaged Hollywood Hulk Hogan, and those guys, as well as what was going on the WWF side with Stone Cold and what have you. And I was back in for a bit, fell out, got back in college during, honestly, looking back, a really dreadful time for the Fed. In the early aughts, post-Attitude Era, when sort of Triple H was lording over the company. And so, my friends were all into the Fed, and I watched with them loyally and followed it avidly. But I also sought out things like TNA wrestling, things like Ring of Honor. I remember acquiring the best of CM Punk through not the most legal of means, and
What year would you say you got that? Like, around what
'04,
time?
'04.
Okay.
And it was just devoured that stuff, and you know, as you has been apparent, you know, throughout my story, I fell off again. Kind of tried to get back into the E in the early parts of last decade. You know, Punk was my access point there, and you know, once he left, honestly, not really much was keeping me with the company, and I thought I was done with wrestling for good until my best friend showed me the Golden Lovers versus the Young Bucks from New Japan Pro Wrestling. I believe that match was in March of 2018. And I was blown away, had never seen anything like it. And really from then on, like about, I'd say like Dominion 2018, I've been really plugged into New Japan in particular, but like all wrestling. Like I've, you know, got excited about AEW launching and have seen every AEW show. Not every Dark, but every Dynamite and pay-per-view. And started following, you know, other American and Japanese companies off and on as the interest pulled me in. And I mean, I just really have been totally enamored with pro wrestling since then, and don't see myself falling off anytime soon, because there's just so much good stuff. And now that we have more access than ever to wrestling from more places, you know, more variety of pro wrestling, I mean, there's just always kind of something to satiate whatever kind of wrestling fan and in whatever mood I'm in.
Okay. It's really funny that you mentioned a few things where it really felt like we were very paralleled in especially how we started. When you mentioned Money Inc., Money Incorporated, that was really one of my very first memories as a wrestling fan. Like, I'm sure, like, for me, it would have been around 1992 or so, like whenever Hogan was still at the top. But I definitely remember Ted DiBiase and Erwin R. Shyster, Money Incorporated. And my biggest early memory was the Steiner brothers, who, for me, I immediately connected with them because they were from Michigan. And they beat Money Inc. for the World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Championships sometime in 1993. So it wasn't just that they were wrestling, but this idea of the storyline of these guys taking on these rich guys. And even back then, I was very much angry at rich people. So make of that what you will. Even I would have been like 9 years old, I figured that out. Also, like you, during around this time, I got to see WCW worldwide on Saturdays, and when I was with my dad, I could see WCW Saturday night. So I very vividly remember seeing Sting at a very young age, like rat tail, blonde haired Sting. I remember that era, the surfer Sting, if you will. And I loved Sting just as much as I loved Bret Hart back then. That they were both parallel, but kind of around the same point as you. There's not a lot that I remember aside from some really cheesy, corny gimmicks from the World Wrestling Federation, like the Goon and the Repo Man.
The Repo Man, Duke the Dumpster Drosy.
Oh yeah. Those are etched into my brain until the Monday Night Wars began. And I was very devoted to WCW World Championship Wrestling. I watched every Monday Nitro from Scott Hall's first appearance to the very last one, the very final Nitro. Maybe I missed a few during like the really bad period in like 98, 99, but I was very team WCW because so much of what I loved in wrestling and what sparked my interest was the cruiserweight division and the WCW mid card, and eventually what the NWO was doing. But really, it was the cruiserweight division. Ultimo Dragon, Dean Malenko, Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, Juventud Guerrera. Seeing these really athletic dudes from all over the world in these elaborate costumes, and they're not just a bunch of big stiffs throwing dudes. They're bouncing off the ropes, they're doing chain wrestling, they're doing submission holds, and it's all this really cool stuff that really just kind of blew my mind. Also, Chris Jericho, he was maybe the first wrestler that I really appreciated as a personality, because Monday Night Jericho, the conspiracy victim, Ralphus, I found all of this just to be the most entertaining stuff in wrestling imaginable. It felt like there was one guy that could finally do all of it, and it was Chris Jericho. He could wrestle, he could talk, he was funny, he was intense when he had to be. Chris Jericho, for a long time, I could say was my favorite wrestler. I was a Jerichoholic. Also, Glacier. I was big on Glacier because it melded that little part in my brain that we would see later on in wrestling that blended nerdy stuff into pro wrestling. So for me, Glacier kind of sparked that.
That's so interesting. I've never thought about him as like a proto, like current day indie wrestler.
I just remember thinking, like a lot of people, they're clearly doing a take on Sub-Zero for Mortal Kombat. And my thought was, unlike a lot of people, I love it. I absolutely love it. He's doing his kata in the ring. He's hitting people with the cryonic kick. His entrance is full of snow. His video packages are cool. And he had this whole thing about the mysterious helmet that he got from his karate master and Mortis and Wrath. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. It really did feel like something that would have been a storyline in a fighting game. And I absolutely loved it. When WCW and ECW folded, because I was able to catch ECW every now and then, and I did enjoy, more than anything, I enjoyed their willingness to take risks. And that's kind of stuck with me, that idea of daring to be a little risky, and daring to be a little controversial in pro wrestling. So when those two companies folded in 2001, that really sucked, Doc. And just for everyone, full disclosure, I am Black, African American, if you will, and the Triple H reign of terror in the early 2000s with the World Heavyweight title really had the moment for me that everybody knows, and that's WrestleMania 19. And when Booker T lost to Triple H for the World Heavyweight title, that was the first time that I really had to question, why am I still watching this stuff? I was just in my first year in the Air Force, and by then I was really done with WWE. I was completely done. But I had always had a little bit of an awareness of wrestling on the internet. I was in the very early WWF America Online chat rooms. I eventually, around 2000 or so, found PW Insider after they branched off from RunWrestling.com. And yeah, I've been following things online on the internet for a very long time. I just remember making my way, and I first saw New Japan Pro Wrestling, actually. And I remember seeing the name Yuji Nagata and was like, oh, Yuji Nagata. Yeah, he was on WCW. And I remember reading the match results from New Japan and seeing Yuji Nagata, Hiroyoshi Tenzan. And I got into that era of New Japan that was kind of known as a terrible era of New Japan because Antonio Inoki was trying to incorporate a lot of shoot fighters and mixed martial artists into New Japan, and it did terrible business for them. And Yuji Nagata's career was almost completely ruined. Satoshi Kojima left the company entirely to go to All Japan because of this. And that era of New Japan from, I'd say, 2000 to 2003, there was some good in there, but there's a lot of not good. And then when it came to the internet, I also came across Kazaa, the old ancient sharing platform.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember getting to see NWA TNA and its X Division. And I recognized the name Jerry Lynn from ECW. Like, okay, Jerry Lynn's there. All right, I'll check it out. And then I remember seeing this guy by the name of AJ Styles. And young me had the spark in his brain that was like, wait, that's Air Styles, his tag team with Air Paris from WCW. And I was like, yeah, that's right. That's he was on WCW, wasn't he? So yes, when people say AJ Styles was in the very final days of WCW, he really was. I was there. If you have the WWE Network in those final weeks of Monday Nitro, he's there. You can see him. Look it up. And those really early X Division matches, there was also this guy from New York that nobody had ever heard of by the name of the Amazing Red. And man, he blew everybody away. It was like seeing Rey Mysterio Jr. on WCW for the first time when Amazing Red broke out. It was amazing, truly. And just this whole idea of this X Division style of it's not about weight limits, it's about no limits. It felt like the natural progression of what the Cruiserweight division was becoming. And while I was looking at all of these X Division matches, I found on Kazaa this guy from California by the name of Spanky, who would eventually be known as Brian Kendrick. And he would have a lot of matches with his training partner from the Shawn Michaels Wrestling Academy, his training partner, American Dragon. So I would see all of these matches of Spanky versus American Dragon in Memphis, Spanky versus American Dragon in Texas, because at the time they both had developmental contracts. And all of like you'd hear about this guy American Dragon. Who's this guy American Dragon? He's so good. American Dragon. He's technical. He can fly a little bit. He's got some real passion, some real fire. This dude American Dragon is really good. So eventually I found Ring of Honor, like in its very early years, like 2003 or so. Like, so I remember thinking way back then in the early days of American independent wrestling that low-key American Dragon, the Fallen Angel Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, Jay Briscoe, because Mark Briscoe wasn't old enough to be on a show yet. Just going through those early days of Ring of Honor and eventually seeing a very young CM Punk and Colt Cabana and Nigel McGuinness and Claudio Castagnoli and Austin Aries and Alex Shelley and Roderick Strong. And the list can go on and on. And that eventually led me to Japanese wrestling because Ring of Honor had their relationships with Pro Wrestling Noah and Dragon Gate. And when it was Noah especially, I found the Noah heavyweights and hearing all of these stories about the All Japan heavyweight division of the 90s and eventually becoming the Noah heavyweight division of the 2000s. Along with that, their exciting junior heavyweights, Kotaro Suzuki, my personal favorite, Naomichi Marufuji, who kind of blew my mind in the same way Ultimo Dragon did, where he was just, he'd have different gear every week, he'd have new moves in his moveset every week, and he was just like the most innovative dude in the world. And of course, Kenta, just this badass dude who would kick people's faces off. On top of that, the Pro Wrestling Noah heavyweights putting on these unbelievable main events. Jun Akiyama, Mitsuharu Misawa, Kenta Kobashi, Yoshihiro Takayama. Just Noah was unreal at the time, and it just so happened to be at the time where New Japan was really down and Hiroshi Tanahashi hadn't quite ascended yet. And like, I had my Ring of Honor and Noah fix in pro wrestling for a long, long time. And
you're very lucky, by the way, to have witnessed those days in real time.
I got to live through a lot of wrestling, and that's not even counting the fact that I got to see Chikara and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, because with independent wrestling, you can be a little bit more freelance about it. And Chikara and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, they opened up my mind of the concept of wrestling as entertainment and how entertaining wrestling can be, because you'd have all of these dudes from all across the indies doing awesome in-ring action, but with Chikara especially, they'd stretch it out and make these wacky concepts for storylines and doing just the most ridiculous shit in the ring imaginable. And it just became that era of wrestling from the 2000s to the mid 2010s, of just that entire era of professional wrestling really stuck with me hard. Most recently, I enjoy AEW a lot because a lot of those guys from that era of wrestling are now on television every week, and that makes me very happy. And also recently, Lucha Underground really stuck with me in the same way that Chikara did, in that it took pro wrestling as a concept and put it as something else. And I like wrestling that is not afraid to blend and meld various other forms of genre entertainment into it. And Lucha Underground really stuck with me recently. Lucha Underground was part AAA in Mexico, part Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, part telenovela, and part Mortal Kombat. And I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. And seeing the onset of cinematic wrestling becoming more of a concept really makes me happy now, because I love things in wrestling that are a little outside of the box. Like, I loved Broken Matt Hardy. I loved a lot of the weirder stuff that happens in pro wrestling that can be a little strange and sometimes comedic, but those are all subjective, of course. But I've always said, don't be afraid to do more than just regular pro wrestling. And aside from that one bit, thanks to Triple H, who I still to this day harbor a little bit of disdain for, I've actually really never stopped. but that's because I got the door to the rest of pro wrestling open to me at a very young age, and I was never just a WWF guy, so I didn't need to be.
And no one needs to be now, thankfully. And
thankfully,
thankfully, for the listeners' benefit, I didn't get to go over what my tastes are in pro wrestling, but I think those will come to the fore as we discuss things over the weeks. I think our tastes are similar in many ways, but especially with modern stuff, and as you put it, outside of the box stuff, they will diverge in some ways. So we will have a bit of friction. So it will not be a total love fest at times, more than likely.
Just a friendly conversation about wrestling. So here in the doc, you had something for favorite wrestlers and matches. So yeah, I'm really interested in this, actually, Doc. I'd really like to know some of your favorite wrestlers and favorite matches.
Okay. Well, all time, I think I've already given the game away. Probably the Hitman, Bret Hart, all-time
choice.
fave. I just, even as a wee child of 8, I could tell this man was on another level to just about anyone he got in the ring with, except for his own family, funnily enough. And yeah, I've always just loved the character. I liked his big heel turn. I've in his matches, I thought were just always just, I don't know, the excellence of execution, one might say, right? And I'm a big CM Punk guy. Had a rocky relationship with my CM Punk fandom in recent years because, as he put it, some of the choices he made in his personal life, and things like that. But I have made peace with that, and he's, he just, to my mind, the best talker in the business. Not necessarily the best in-ring performer, but he just gets the talking and the character aspects of wrestling so well, and just something about him speaking is able to talk me metaphorically into the building every single time. I mean, he's even in AEW right now, which is a promotion of great talkers. He never seems like he's giving a wrestling promo. He just seems like he's a person talking to you. And I just have always admired him greatly for that. And just thought his feuds in Ring of Honor particularly with Raven, I mean, I just was totally enamored with that when I saw that play out for me on those ripped discs, and for Best in the World. Like I said, I think that was 04. And then I think like modern day guys, probably gonna like tilt towards New Japan. That's where most of my favorite performers are currently working. I'm a really big Kazuchika Okada fan. I think my favorite match in like the modern era of wrestling is Okada Omega 4 from Dominion 2018. The best 2 of 3 falls, the 7-star special. It's so funny because that was like one of my introductory matches to New Japan Pro Wrestling, but but I don't know if too many things have risen to that level since then. Maybe Okada Ospreay from Wrestle Kingdom this year. I just thought that was tremendous as well. And I got to throw in, any Bret Hart fan, I think will point to Hart Austin WrestleMania 13, the infamous double turn with Austin, his face a bloody mess in the sharpshooter, refusing to tap out, passing out, becoming a babyface before our eyes, and Bret beginning his, pro-Canadian, anti-American heel turn. Love that match.
Those are all excellent choices. Just fantastic wrestling. For me, I really have to think about my favorite wrestlers because I've watched so much wrestling for now coming up on 30 years. It is almost impossible for me to narrow down like who I can say is like my absolute favorite. But the two guys whose body of work always kind of stand out to me the most. These guys, I would say, are my 1A and 1B, are Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon, and AJ Styles. I think those two guys are, for me, the pro wrestlers who have satisfied my love of pro wrestling the most. In the case of Bryan Danielson, and you can say this about AJ Styles too, early on in their careers, they were not known for being able to be the best speakers, but they eventually grew into it. And I think one thing for me when it comes to wrestlers that I really like, I know they're not playing a character. I know when I see Bryan Danielson, I'm seeing him talk about wrestling passionately. When I see AJ Styles, I know that he is talking about wrestling passionately. Wrestling is their lives, and that makes me believe them and believe that they are going into the ring and giving everything they've got. Those would be kind of the two that might be at the top. Right below them, Sami Zayn. And I think for a very long time, Sami Zayn has been the most underrated professional wrestler of the modern era. I'm including his past life in that when he was under a mask. I think he is as good as anybody you could say. If there's an S tier, if you want to put like Brian and AJ in the S plus tier, I think Sammy is right underneath them. And I feel like I'm gonna probably say something controversial, but keep in mind, I have watched his entire wrestling career from his first viral video to now.
Zack Ryder. No.
I do like him. He might be creeping up there for me. He might be. But I remember this dude. It would have been around 2009, 2010 or so, putting out this absurd YouTube video that if it came out now, it would be called a cinematic match. And it was called Kenny Omega is the King of the Anywhere match. And he challenged Mike Angel to a Falls Count Anywhere match. And this match involved essentially a hardcore brawl in Mike Angel's home. A Michinoku driver off of a 15-foot sand dune, and Kenny Omega hitting the Hadoken into a river. And since then, I have seen Kenny Omega's entire wrestling career and his rise to prominence, and kind of how the same way I feel about Bryan Danielson and AJ Styles, he really is right now just in a class all his own. And
what you said, nothing controversial. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to, like, if people think that's controversial, they need to go, as the Briscoes say, watch the damn tapes. I mean, the man is incredible as far as like just the art, but has done incredible business for a really long time in multiple countries. So you're out to lunch if you think this is a controversial opinion.
And I just want to be clear that this is Kenny Omega as a complete wrestler, not just the New Japan Pro Wrestler cleaner that had the 7-star match. This also includes the leader of the Elite, who was a complete nut job. This also includes the DDT Kenny Omega that was part of the Golden Lovers with Kota Ibushi. This also includes his tag team with Chuck Taylor as a part of the Men of Low Moral Fiber. One of my favorite matches ever is between Kenny Omega and Bryan Danielson from Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and the majority of the match is comedy. The match is mostly comedy, but it's brilliant. And I've said so many times to people that Kenny Omega is such a complete performer that I think maybe a lot of wrestling fans may not fully appreciate just how much of a complete performer he is as a character, as a personality, as an athlete, as everything. And he's really made it for me. He's had so many great moments for me, just like Bryan Danielson. His matches with Nigel McGuinness in 2007, his 60-minute draw with Samoa Joe at Ring of Honor Fight of the Century, just like AJ Styles, his 3-way match with Christopher Daniels and Samoa Joe in 2005. His run in WWE has actually been pretty excellent. He's had some great matches with John Cena, of all people. His run in New Japan, he had a fantastic match with Hiroshi Tanahashi that immediately comes to mind. And Sami Zayn, I could say the same thing. He's had fantastic matches as a tag team with Kevin Owens in their past lives. They were a great tag team in Ring of Honor and Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. and they were great rivals. Also in his own right, also having great matches with Kenny Omega, also having great matches with guys like Naomichi Marufuji and Nigel McGuinness in Ring of Honor, making his way to WWE and really making NXT the super indie. He was part of that. He was kind of the nucleus of that. And he is one guy, maybe the only guy, that I would actively go out of my way to watch recently in World Wrestling Entertainment. So those are my favorites, and those are a few of my favorite matches. And I want to throw in a couple of tag teams, and
Okay.
Doc, you by all means as well. Real quickly, tag teams. Harlem Heat, the Steiner Brothers, the Briscoes, the Usos, the New Day, and the Young Bucks.
If you take out the New Day and the Usos, I'm totally on board with that list. I mean, unfortunately for me, a lot of my time as a fan has been like when tag teams have been down. I was too young for the territory stuff where it really mattered. I missed the glory days of All Japan and things like that. So, when I think tag teams, I mean, I do think Steiners and Harlem Heat, they were like the only two really pushed tag teams in World Championship Wrestling that I can recall for a number of years. And that's rightly so, because
High Voltage.
they were. I remember High Voltage, but I wouldn't put them on the list. Mortis and Wrath, anyone? No. I actually did like Mortis and Wrath quite a bit, and the Sinister Minister. No, the Steiners are incredible. I need to go watch Steiners in New Japan because I haven't really sought any of that out.
Yeah, you do.
But I've heard
it's
awesome.
Yeah, Scott Steiner was Brock Lesnar 20 years before Brock Lesnar. He was the glitch. He was an athletic glitch. Yeah, check out the Steiners in New Japan for sure. Okay, I think we've given our backstory, so let's just jump into the format of the show that we're going to do. We're going to start with Stock Up, Stock Down, Doctor. And for me, I guess for us, for the show, this is going to be people in pro wrestling who you think might be on the rise or might be on the way down the elevator, as it were. And I'm going to start with my first stock up. Let me make sure that I have this in my notes. Yeah, I do. My first stock up is going to be a tag team, given we were just talking about tag teams. And these are a couple of guys that I've been a fan of for a very long time. I would say in the modern era of tag team wrestling, they might be my favorites just right now. And in their run on the independents, I really loved these guys. And seeing them on national television every week in a prominent spot really makes me happy. And that's Matt Lee and Jeff Parker 2.0. The
Get
show rules. Now, while their win-loss record isn't exactly the greatest right now in AEW, they are always in a prime spot. They came in and they were immediately feuding with Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston, and they were having a match with Sting, the real Sting, not Jeff Farmer. And I just love that these guys are where they are after being in purgatory for about 3 years after their run on the indies. And as far as I'm concerned, they're right where they should be.
They've come out of retirement to wrestle again. Thank God.
That's right. That's right.
Rip Everrise.
We barely knew ye.
Yes. No argument for me. I would buy this stock. I mean, this is a team that I love. I mean, I think that they are doing really great work on the YouTube shows Dark and Elevation, as well as Dynamite and Rampage, when they're on, either, wrestling, like you said, really big stars, or just being there to sort of uplift and support Daniel Garcia, the rising star, everyone's indie darling right now. They are really, really great with him, and the three of them, I just think, make so much sense together as a package deal. And I love how they're being used. Like you said, their record does not reflect, I think, their place in the mind of fans, be it consciously or subconsciously. I think that they are going to be, as the months go on, I think that they will continue to be a big factor in AEW television.
I hope so. I truly do. Who's your stock up?
So my first stock up, I think I looked at this exercise as a kind of a penny stock situation, right? And also my stock down, I'm going to break the format that you've laid out and do something slightly more meta than a particular
That's
wrestler.
Okay. So am I.
Okay, very good. Okay, so my stock up is a very young female wrestler in Ring of Honor by the name of Rok-C. Rok-C. So you may or may not know this, but Ring of Honor, since their previous women's champion left under a cloud of controversy, they retired the Women of Honor title. And they have brought back a women's title that they're just calling Ring of Honor World Women's Championship. And they had a big tournament for it, which was very good. Most of it was on ROH TV. I think all of it was, except for the final, which was on Death Before Dishonor, their last big pay-per-view show. And, they had a lot of new ladies. They had, brought people in from outside, like Chelsea Green. They had legends like Angelina Love in there. And the final at Death Before Dishonor was, these are two ladies I'm totally unfamiliar with. Miranda Alizé, the Lucha Baddie, up against Rok-C. Rok-C, who is 19 years old, who's a Booker T trainee, been wrestling out of Texas since she was 13. She's now the new Ring of Honor World Women's Champion, and she just had this fantastic tournament. She's, a little bit raw, but honestly, I think at 19, a better performer than many wrestlers that are on AEW television right now, and had just this great tournament final with Miranda Alizé. I thought it was like bordering on like a 4-star batch if you want to use the Meltzer scale. And I just am so happy that ROH went with this fresh young face to lead their new women's division. And just the whole essence of her character and presentation is like not quite to the levels of Smiley Kylie Ray, but you can sense the joy in her for professional wrestling and for being in a big spot, and the appreciation of the fans and love of the business. I think she's very charismatic personality, and I'm really happy she won the title, and I'm interested now in where this goes, where her title reign goes. I'm interested in the Ring of Honor women's division, kind of what they're going to do going forward, because, it's perennially been kind of a joke, but this tournament, I thought, was a huge step in the right direction. So Rok-C for my stock up.
Good choice. I really like that. Also, out of the Ring of Honor Women's Championship tournament, I think there's been a couple of wrestlers that I think fans are going to keep an eye on. Me in particular, I've really taken a liking to Max the Impaler. There's just something about Max the Impaler that really just sticks in my head. I'm really all about her. But
she was not
to our stock down. She was not.
No, she was. She only was DQ'd because she couldn't stop punching Angelina Love.
She was, as they say, she got disqualified for kicking too much ass.
Yes.
Okay, so let's move to our stock down, where we think that there might be something out there that might not be doing so great, and you might want to look away. Doc, I don't know why, but I have this strange, sneaky feeling that we might have the same thing for the stock down.
Okay.
I have this strange, sneaky feeling. I'm going to let you go first.
Okay, all right. My stock down is Wrestle Kingdom, the brand.
Oh, we're close. We're
Okay.
close. We're
Okay.
close, but I'll let you go first.
Well, Wrestle Kingdom,
3 nights. Sorry.
three nights, David. 3 nights. I think this is bad. This is real. I mean, and they're not even all in the Tokyo Dome, by the way. Oh boy. So Wrestle Kingdom as a brand, I think, has suffered for a couple of years. I think this 3-night fiasco necessitated by the pandemic and the need to continue to sell as many tickets as possible in these limited capacity venues and arenas. This watering down of the Wrestle Kingdom brand, this step is like the biggest blow to the brand. But I believe that since they have done like the double title, like Gold Rush, a couple of years ago for the first time, I think, where they wanted to combine the Intercontinental and IWGP Heavyweight titles. And they had a mini tournament over 2 days at Wrestle Kingdom. And particularly last year, I thought that format really did some damage to, didn't totally devalue, but did some damage to the credibility of the G1 Climax, because Kota Ibushi won that tournament and had his briefcase stolen from him by Jay White, lost a match to it, and yet strolls into one of the Tokyo Dome main events because it's just something he wanted to do. And I think the format has just been really hurting them, but they're tripling down on it here because they have to. And I mean, I if it's anything like what New Japan has been, it's going to be 3 very watered down shows, which could be something really special if you combined the top of all 3 cards into a single super card. But they, for a long time, Gato and company have been splitting single shows into multiple shows, and Wrestle Kingdom is just the latest example. But I mean, I know a lot of people, make fun of WWE for doing this with WrestleMania, right? But New Japan it's just as bad. And I mean, Wrestle Kingdom was an untarnished brand, unlike Mania, I feel. And now it's just going to lose more and more of its luster as the cards get watered down, and many of the matches you see at a Wrestle Kingdom, like the pinnacle, like the jewel in the New Japan crown, are going to be very mediocre, just muck. And it saddens me as a New Japan fan.
I agree. And to your point, I'm actually going to give WWE a little bit of credit here in the fact that with their WrestleMania weekends, they will have multiple flavors of events. They will have the fan access, their own kind of convention. They will have the Hall of Fame ceremony. They will have an NXT takeover, and you will have like 800 different independent wrestling events going on that entire weekend. That will not be the case with New Japan and Wrestle Kingdom. You'll just have one Wrestle Kingdom show, then another Wrestle Kingdom show, then another Wrestle Kingdom show. And that's going to lead into my stock down. When you have 3 Wrestle Kingdom main events, what is even the point of winning the G1? And I'm very down on the G1 right now. And I hate saying that because in the case of the G1, it really is a way to set the tone and set the table for a number of feuds and stories and angles and main event matches. And with the G1 Climax right now starting, people are very lukewarm on it. And because of the pandemic, you don't have as many names as you might like. You still have a lot of the usual suspects for the G1 in recent years, but it just does not have the same buzz as it normally does. And I think that we might have a problem with the G1 and with New Japan Pro Wrestling going into 2022. I think that we might have an issue with New Japan going into 2022. We'll see how attendance goes with Wrestle Kingdom going forward, and if attendance restrictions in Japan get lifted, and we'll see if they're able to fill out arenas in 2022. If they can, then I'm wrong. Then okay, I'm wrong. If not, it might be a problem for New Japan Pro Wrestling, because I'm seeing the G1 and yeah, I'm not exactly enthused.
I mean, no one is talking about it. And if you had told me that would be the case 3 years ago when I got into this promotion, I said, you're a fool. The G1 is like this incredible, prestigious tournament, the pomp and circumstance, like such a classy affair, and the match quality, and
minimum 4.5 stars every single night for a month.
Yes. And like, to be fair, as we record this, the G1 has just gotten underway. Match day 2 was today. There have still been, like, the main events for both of those shows were tremendous. I mean, as good as you're going to find on any show anywhere this year. The problem is the undercard. Like you said, they filled it out as best they could without, the foreign talent that they could, even the ones that they could normally rely on, like Will Ospreay and Jay White, Juice Robinson, can't, not that they can't come over. They're just tired of the 2-week quarantine turnaround, and who can blame them, right? And then they lose the opportunity to bring over people like John Moxley, people like, I don't know, Buddy Murphy, we think is going to be at this New Japan show in America. He'd probably be in the G1 if travel restrictions were lifted. So, I mean, the company just feels really stagnant, and there's just a lot on the undercard that's not very, worthy, quote unquote, of the G1.
The C block, as it's called, is not exactly hot.
No.
But since we're already talking about the G1 block, let's just jump into it. We have it here on our sheet. Let's jump into the G1 real quick. How are you feeling about who's going to come out of the A and B blocks, Doc?
Okay, I got 2 questions for you.
Yeah.
So I think we should pick who we think are going to win, but I'd also like to hear who you'd like to win, who you'd like to see in the final.
Okay.
If Togo handed you the pencil. So I'll tell you what
you go ahead.
Pardon me. I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. I'll give you 2 picks. In fact, I'll give you. I think what ought to happen, not in terms of like, what my heart wants, but like what I think is the most likely scenario is a repeat of the A block final from, I want to say from 2019. Kazuchika Okada coming out of the A block the B block rather, and Kota Ibushi coming out of block A. This will be Ibushi's 4th straight final. But I think Okada will win that match, and I think he will go on to be in the Wrestle Kingdom mix with the true and also the false IWGP World Champions, Shingo Takagi and Will Ospreay, respectively. They will have some kind of situation where 3 of them are in main events for the title over the 3 nights. But that's what I think logically ought to happen. If Gato was locked in a room by himself, but you know what, David? He's not. Dick Togo's there. So you know what I think actually could happen? I think I do. I think we could get Tetsuya Naito versus Evil, Chapter 6. I think we could.
The thing about that is, on paper, I don't hate it. I really don't, because I love the story of Los Ingobernables de Japón. I love the story. I love the arc that it has had. But the matches between Naito and Evil just haven't worked. And Evil as a top heel just haven't worked. They just haven't. And I liked Evil. I
did too.
And it's just a shame that it hasn't worked for people. It just hasn't worked. So I'm going to say, when it comes to the G1, I feel like Gedo is going to stick to his guns, and he's going to stay traditional. And I think when it comes to the G1, it's usually pretty easy to see. It's usually easy to predict if you really think about it. And in the A block, I have in the final of the A block, it would be Tetsuya Naito and Shingo Takagi in the final. And in the B block, I have Kazuchika Okada and the ace, the GOAT, Hiroshi Tanahashi, with that outside chance, I'm agreeing with you, that Evil might sneak in. I'm not ruling that out. He could sneak in, absolutely.
Rule it out at your peril.
But in the G1 final, I have Shingo versus Okada, with Okada getting the win. And is it just me, or has Okada had kind of a quiet 2021?
Oh, he's had a quiet years. yeah, I mean, he's definitely been, perennially cycled down. I think he's had like solid matches. I think his work with Jeff Cobb in particular recently has been really good. But yeah, I mean, they've kept him out of the title picture for a good long while.
I'm feeling like it might be time to hit the Rainbreaker break glass in case of emergency button. And I think he's going to be the one at the G1. And I'm feeling like it's going to be Okada versus Will Ospreay in one of those Wrestle Kingdom main events.
Give
Okada versus Will Ospreay. And that's the one you like. But I'm a big fan of Shingo Takagi.
Yeah.
So I would really like Okada versus Shingo to be one of those main events at Wrestle Kingdom.
I think it should be. In
a perfect world, we'll each get our match.
Yes.
Doc.
Yes.
You'll get Okada versus Ospreay. I'll get Okada versus Shingo, and we'll both be happy.
I mean, they gotta halfway fill up the arena of 3 nights. So.
Yeah. I figure as long as it's not Evil winning the G1, and as long as Evil is not in one of the main events, everybody will be fine.
Everyone will be happy. It's going to be a DEFCON situation if Evil is in this final, and especially if Evil wins. I just can't imagine the discourse, David. But
such a shame about Evil. Such a shame.
I know. Have you seen Okada lately? He looks incredible. Like, his body is in... I mean, he's in great shape. Like, his conditioning.
I know he was pretty banged up, like in 2020, and like everyone was saying that he was
Okada's
getting cycled.
Washed.
Not washed.
But they were saying that. That was an opinion.
I was more like, okay, he's beat up pretty bad. It might be time to cycle him down the card and let him get a break. Let him have a few T-shirt 6-man matches for a while, because he's beat up. Okada is beat up, and it feels like it might be time for him to come back to the top.
I agree. You know what he should do instead of these like 3-month feuds with Yujiro Takahashi? He should do what Tanahashi always does. It's like at New Beginning or the New Japan Cup, lose early and then be like, oh my God, my arm, I'm so injured. I have to take a 3-month break. Sorry, everyone. And then just do that every year so you can come back for the G1 in prime form.
I do believe that. Sorry, I'm
sorry. Did that feel like Tanahashi slander? It wasn't meant to be. He's work 'em, baby. Do your thing.
I guess it's just because I've watched New Japan for so long. I saw Tanahashi's ascension, so I'm just not quite ready to let him go yet.
I know. Well, listen.
I know.
They aren't either. They are. Look at all. He's had an incredible year. Like somehow under the right. Well, I say somehow. People aren't talking about New Japan. It's a very cold promotion. He's had a great year with his matches with Shingo, Kenta. He just had a match with Kazuchika Okada in the G1. David, it was amazing. This guy's having a year. Even now, they have like put him in these big spots, showing that they still trust him to not just like sell tickets, but to do these long main events. He's incredible, man. Don't watch him while you can. Don't take this man for granted, because he will not be in the spot he is in for many more years. Just can't be. He's too banged up.
To me, Tanahashi is in rare air, and I will never doubt him.
Zack Sabre is who I would want in my heart to win the G1, because even more than like seeing my favorite wrestlers win, I really like when guys are elevated. That's my favorite thing in pro wrestling, and I think he's a deserving candidate for something like that. But it's never going to happen. But I would love that.
I would love to see that. We got to see that in the case of Tetsuya Naito. He made his way all the way up, and Zack Sabre Jr. would be an inspired choice. I know the New Japan Cup is really his house.
That's
in a
right.
lot of ways, but I think that's a great choice too for a heart choice. And yeah, hopefully for Wrestle Kingdom we both get our Okada matches, Doc. Hopefully we do, and no evil. So let's talk a little bit about AEW.
How could we not? Hottest promotion on planet Earth.
I know, right? All Out was absurd. The build up to AEW Grand Slam at Arthur Ashe Stadium is really been entertaining.
Fanning myself. It's getting hot in here.
And my goodness, are you seeing this card for the 2 nights of Grand Slam? It's ridiculous.
It's insane. I think, okay, so what I wanted to talk about, despite having AEW storylines on the sheet here, I think talking about the business of AEW right now is like important, because we and others will have feelings about the creative and the directions and everything like that. And that's important. That's valid. But from a business perspective, from a facts and numbers perspective, I mean, you just can't argue with what this promotion is doing. All Out, highest selling pay-per-view, most buys for a non-Fed pay-per-view since 1999 WCW Mayhem. And that number is, we don't know the exact number. We know it's over 200,000. And you might be, when you hear that and when you hear the WCW Mayhem figure, you think to yourself, well, so they did better than shitty WCW. That's great. Let me tell you, go look up WWE pay-per-view numbers in like 2012, 2013, before the network launched, when they started kind of relying on those metrics more. You look at your like non-WrestleMania, non-SummerSlam pay-per-views, I don't know, WWE Battlegrounds or Backlash or something. They only just cleared 200,000. So this is huge for them, right? They are beating Monday Night Raw, the Dynamite Wednesday show, in the coveted 18 to 35, or is it 39? Anyway,
18 to 49.
Thank you. The key demo, 2 weeks in a row after being on the air for less than 2 years. Tony Khan has turned his $25 million investment into something that a Stanford sports business professor values at $400 million. Okay, Turner has torn up their TV agreements twice to give them better deals. They have just run 4 huge shows in Chicago, put tickets on sale for another one at Thanksgiving Eve. You can't find a ticket. Just got gobbled up completely. I mean, the brand is hot. They know what they're doing. people care, people are interested, people are watching, people are buying tickets. I don't know anything about the merch sales, but I mean, I just think to make arguments about the creative direction. I mean, I think you just have to be like, okay, my subjective opinion, I don't care for it. It's not to my taste, but I can't argue with the numbers because I mean, you really can't. I mean, they're just blazing ahead and growing at an incredibly rapid rate.
But you know what's so cool about this is that a lot of this has been very serendipitous. A lot of it has been a lot of really good timing and a little bit of luck on the part of AEW. Right now, these amazing storylines and matches are just kind of falling into their lap. Bryan Danielson main evented WrestleMania this year.
Wow.
And now it fell into AEW's lap that he is going to headline a show in New York City versus Kenny Omega. And that is just such great timing and luck. While Hangman Adam Page is gone on paternity leave, taking care of his new family. And that fell right into AEW's lap. And they're just doing the thing. Because people always say, booking good wrestling shouldn't be that hard. And AEW is doing that. Another example, CM Punk, who was gone from wrestling for so long, comes to AEW and is immediately working with younger talent. He said that and he's doing it. He worked with Darby Allin. He's working with Will Hobbs. And he is elevating those guys. And
so cool.
All of these things with pro wrestling are just working so well for AEW. And they're just, in a lot of ways, they're just kind of letting it happen and letting weekly TV dictate what happens and where things go. But the matches are almost making themselves, and it's working so well for them.
I mean, Tony Khan told Ruby Soho when she asked, "What do you want from me?" "You be you." She's like, "What? But really? That's it? Yep. You go out there and be you." And you know, Cody Rhodes talked about this years ago, you know, to let everyone make their own music. And it's got to be so creatively energizing to all the performers and the talent. And that's really coming through. The fans are picking up on it. And I mean, you're very right to point out like how the chips are falling for them in some ways. But I don't want to also discount kind of how smart and savvy they have been. You know, they've wrestled more matches in front of no fans than with fans, or no fans, or just like wrestlers and limited crowd, right? I mean, so much of AEW's run has been during this pandemic, and they made Jon Moxley into this incredibly hot, meaningful champion during the pandemic. I think a really great example of this, to my mind, is Hikaru Shida. Someone who, if you watch her early AEW bouts, like, people don't really know who she is, right? I mean, so there's not a lot going on for her with the crowd. But she was the women's champion during the pandemic, had a lot of really good matches. Fans come back. She comes out so over. Huge reactions because people watched, people cared. AEW was able to sustain its fan base during one of the hardest times for pro wrestling in the world, like when you can't have fans, or you can't have fans make noise. So I mean, I think just they deserve so much credit for really, since December of last year, honestly, like I feel like they have had their foot on the pedal and have not let up.
And it's been a lot of fun. To your point about Hikaru Shida, she made Britt Baker into a megastar when she won the women's title. And Britt Baker is doing the same thing right now with Ruby Soho. This feud is red hot between the two of them. I will admit, I'm not as big a fan of Britt Baker as some people. I don't dislike her. I like her. There are just other people on the AEW women's roster that I like more.
In this house, we stand the DMD, my friend. Huge fan.
But, as I say, Rebel, not Reba, might be my favorite woman on the AEW roster. I genuinely love Rebel. I love her.
Huge part of that act. Her. Like, Baker would not be what she is without Rebel.
And Britt Baker's title run has been pretty good because of the entire complete package that is around her. You've got Tony Schiavone, you've got Rebel, and now you've got Jamie Hayter. And it has become one of the better title reigns in a while. And I think this feud with Ruby Soho is really good. And as someone who's also a big fan of Thunder Rosa, I almost put Thunder Rosa in my stock down. As someone who's a big fan of her, I'm not so upset that she's not immediately in the women's title picture right now. And I think that as long as the match between Britt Baker and Ruby Soho delivers, I think everybody's going to be talking about this feud between the two of them and their year-end shows, Doc. I really do. And it's really kind of great to see how hot the championships in AEW are. The Lucha Brothers winning the tag titles from the Young Bucks at just the right time to where now there's a whole fresh set of challengers for the Lucha Brothers with a whole new dynamic. And it's just exciting. It really is exciting.
It is. I disagree with you about Britt's title reign. I think up to this point, certainly her winning the title was great. And I think Thunder Rosa really helped establish her in terms of in-ring, what she can offer. But I think since she won I was not crazy about the Nyla Rose feud. I thought they really missed a trick there because Rose was the person who injured Baker. And that's another thing I forgot to point out about how well AEW navigated the pandemic. Injuries, travel restrictions, all that sort of thing. But Baker was out for several months with a leg injury. And they did not lean on that in the feud. The feud was about cheeseburgers and Vicky screaming. Britt kind of felt a little out of place in the ring, wrestling as a babyface. It just didn't work for me. And I like
both.
The
problem.
Yeah, I like both performers. I like them a lot, and I just thought that feud just didn't deliver. So I'm really happy that the Baker Soho program, is delivering. I think
it's because
go ahead.
I think Britt needs a really good babyface, and that's Ruby Soho, clearly. The feud with Nyla once again confirmed that Britt Baker is not a great babyface. So we're probably not going to see that again for a while, I think.
She was very bad on the initial months
I was going to say,
of AEW TV.
Yes.
I think there was a time
even
when she was I think there was a time when she was doing commentary for a pay-per-view pre-show.
Yeah.
And she just didn't say anything. And I was like, oh man, she's dying out there.
The early days of AEW when they tried to market Britt Baker as a babyface just didn't work at all. And AEW has been given a lot of credit for taking things that don't work and flipping them around and finding ways to make them work. And Britt Baker's a prime example. And
yeah,
I think we should probably just move on from AEW just because that could be a 2-hour podcast on its own.
It could. It really could.
And we're going to wrap up with talking a little bit about Ring of Honor in 2021. Now, the news came out after Death Before Dishonor, Doc, that they will not be running any more live events in 2021 due to concerns of the pandemic. It's been said many times that over the course of the pandemic, Ring of Honor has been the company that has been the best and has done the best job of running a wrestling company through a global pandemic. They have not let anybody go. They had testing and vaccinations early, and they did, and honestly, lots of other wrestling companies did better than one in particular. I am admittedly a little concerned because I don't know what Ring of Honor is going to look like in 2022. And I hope that this doesn't have a dark side for Ring of Honor, because a wrestling world without Ring of Honor would really break my heart. Kind of in the same way that a wrestling world without Shakara kind of breaks my heart. So I'm gonna put out to the 7 deities to hopefully send a message to Sinclair Broadcasting, is to just give Ring of Honor a better time slot of television on your networks, and help them keep afloat, give them better TV distribution, please. And the thing is that I think Ring of Honor has a really solid roster.
They sure do.
I was before we recorded, I was looking through Ring of Honor's roster, and they're pretty solid top to bottom. There are a lot of performers, men and women, that I really like. Some I don't, but what are you going to do? And their world champion, in my opinion, is one of the most talented dudes on the planet in Bandito. He's phenomenal.
He was almost my stock up. He was almost that. So good.
Yeah, he's so good. It really upsets me how under the radar he can go sometimes, because he is both Ring of Honor and PWG champion, but neither of those companies were running very much for very long. And Bandito is so fantastic. If he gets like a classic long Ring of Honor world title reign, and he has the opportunity to have just awesome match after awesome match after awesome match after awesome match, I'll take it, man. Because I feel like Bandito he's one of those guys that you can really build your wrestling promotion around. And I like that Ring of Honor has a mix of old and new. The Briscoes are still there doing their thing. Jay Lethal is still there doing his thing. The Foundation, Jonathan Gresham, that dude Brian Johnson.
The Mecca.
I'm deadly serious about this, Doc. With Brian Johnson, I see a little bit of American Dragon in him. Like there's something with him. There is something with Brian Johnson. Like, every once in a while I have those guys where I point out and it's like him or her, that guy. There's something. And I'm doing that with there's something with Brian Johnson. I think he might be the guy.
It's a great talker.
And yeah. And I really hope Ring of Honor, and it'll be their 20th anniversary. Yeah. Maybe 2022 will be Ring of Honor's bounce back year, because I feel like the pieces are there. I really do.
I do too. I think maybe only CMLL can compare to Ring of Honor when it comes to promotions that have been snake bitten by the pandemic. And we talked about how it's been affecting New Japan, of course, but they're still running. Ring of Honor did not run for about 9 months of last year, which is the responsible thing to do, as you say. But also, it's like a third of the time that they had their big money free agents under contract. And it looks like, Roosh and his family and his Lucha Pals are not going to get to have the run that they could and should have, because it looks like they're on their way out of the company at the end of the year. I think, unfortunately, that means Dragon Lee, despite the fact that he and Kenny King just won the tag titles, I think in the coming months they're going to drop those. Roosh dropped the world title to Bandito. I think those guys, Bestia Del Ring, hopefully not Bandito and Rey Horus, because I, as you say, I really, really like Bandito in particular. But so, yeah, they're not running in front of fans anymore, which is a shame because they just got fans back. But I think, like, the question we have on our sheet that I wanted to talk about is like, yeah, what is the future of this company, right? They keep getting blow after blow. Are they going to get up? Like, what do they look like? What is their identity? And, this is Sinclair Media, of course, holds the keys ultimately. Hopefully, they do not just wake up one day and say no more ROH. I doubt that will happen. But I think in terms of their wrestling product, how they could make steps forward, how they could differentiate themselves. One of the things I think that they're already much better at than almost any company in the US, honestly, certainly than their peers like Impact, is like the physicality of the matches. I think that is just such a strong point of theirs. And that's why I keep watching it, honestly. It's like the physicality of the matches is really attractive to me. I think, like I said before, the women's division, them kind of leaning into that, really bringing in quality talents could be good. I think two things, though, they really, really need. I think, number one, to lean into and emphasize the pure title and pure rules matches, because this, to me, is that WCW mid-card kind of thing that you talked about that could grab people's attention because it's so different, it's so unique, and it's good. The stories that you can tell using these pure rules are so, I mean, to me, interesting and just different.
They did it before.
Yeah.
They've done it before.
They have done it before. And you have someone there. I mean, Gresham just lost the title to Josh Woods. And I think that means that Gresham, they're going to elevate him to the world title scene. But people like that, I mean, really care about sort of the legacy of ROH and the pure tradition. And you got a lot of guys, I think, that fit that style really well. And I think some guys that don't. But that's really interesting, too, when you have fish out of water in these pure rules matches. Like, I think CM Punk wrestled some of those and had those moments of, oh, my God, I've used up a rope break. I'm not used to these rules. Like, you could just do great and different things like that. But David, the number one thing I think that they need to do and that needs to happen for them is I think the forbidden door needs to open for them. I think that would, more than anything I've mentioned, like, put eyes on their TV, because you know, it certainly helped Impact Wrestling when Kenny Omega had their top title. And now Christian Cage does, and that's not as big of a thing. But I think that they will, because at Death Before Dishonored, Jay Lethal, who sounds like a math teacher, just going to say it, he does when he talks, he cut a very impassioned promo about the Pure Division and really emphasized, like, any company in the world, anyone out there who wants to walk through that open door and wrestle in the pure style against our best pure guys, like, we invite you. Come on, bring it on. And he was in the ring with a whole bunch of pure wrestling guys. And it was a cool scene. And it got me excited thinking about who might come over. I mean, I know that they soured, you know, their Zack Sabre Jr., people like that on them in the past. But man, he would just fit that so well.
Yeah, he would.
To rumble with Jonathan Gresham for the pure title.
Just to make the obvious comparison, he would do for that pure title what Nigel McGuinness did. And he made that title. Nigel made that title. And yeah, oh God, Zack Sabre Jr. and Jonathan Gresham. Come on. That'd be ridiculous.
You gotta open that forbidden door. Gotta take advantage of that for sure.
Got to. I choose to be optimistic about the future of Ring of Honor. 2022 will be their 20th anniversary. I think Sinclair is probably aware of that. And I think that they probably realize the legacy that Ring of Honor has. And I would not be surprised if Ring of Honor is genuine in, one, their willingness to work with wrestling outside of their own brand, and two, finally make the women's championship a priority. It's been a problem for them their entire existence, and I think now they're going to make it a priority. So I am choosing to believe that Ring of Honor will really turn it around in 2022.
Me too. And they're going to freshen up the roster a little bit. Like I said, you know, people are on their way out, and not just the luchadors, but like, I think PCO's contract is up. People like that's going to free up some money for Sinclair, who, like, they're not like AEW in terms of the amount of people they bring in, but the people that they target and do bring in, they pay very well. So I think they can afford big names. So I think expect next year to see, not just some Forbidden Door, talent share stuff, but like a couple of signees that raise your eyebrows. At least that's what I'm hoping.
I'm hoping so too. And when that happens, we'll talk about it here on the Open Door Wrestling Podcast. We did it, Doc! We did our first episode. We made it. Yay.
We did it.
Thank you all out there for listening. Thanks for checking us out. Follow us on Twitter at opendoorwrespod. That's opendoor, WRES pod. And hey, check us out. Let us know what you think. Send us an email if you want to write us something in long form at opendoorwrespod@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Are you somewhere in between? Did you like Glacier? Let us know.
Give us all your Glacier opinions.
For the Subtle Doctor, I'm DJM. Thanks for listening.
Peace, everybody.